Unfortunately, Bart Ehrman has used his prestige as a text critic to give the impression to lay people that the text of the New Testament is terribly corrupted and uncertain. He wrote a book called Misquoting Jesus, in which he gives the impression to lay people that we really don't know what the original New Testament said, because as it's been copied over the years, so many thousands and thousands of variants have crept into the manuscripts that it's just uncertain what the original text read. Now, here, what has happened, I think, is there are really two Bart Ehrmans that are on display. Dan Wallace, who is a textual scholar at Dallas Theological Seminary, likes to distinguish between what he calls the scholarly Bart Ehrman and the popular Bart Ehrman. The scholarly Bart Ehrman knows that the text of the New Testament has been established to 99% accuracy. That is to say, the original wording of the New Testament is now established to about 99%, so that the degree of uncertainty in the text of the New Testament is only about 1%. There are about 138,000 Greek words in the New Testament. Of these, only about 1,400 are uncertain today. 99% are established with real certainty. And of that 1% that still remains uncertain, I'll just pause here till they get this straightened out. Of that 1% that still remains uncertain, no doctrinal issue hangs on them. An example of the sort of uncertainty in the variants that would remain would be, for example, in 1 John chapter 1, where some of the texts read, "We write this in order that your joy may be full." Other manuscripts say, "We write this in order that our joy may be full." And it's not certain whether the original letter of John read your or our. Just utterly trivial in terms of its doctrinal importance. Now, as I say, the scholarly Bart Ehrman knows this. But then there's the popular level Bart Ehrman, who gives the misimpression to lay people that the text of the New Testament is incredibly... And this is not true. He knows that this is a deception. And therefore, I'm inclined not to... Good Bart knows that the text of the New Testament is virtually certain. Bad Bart deliberately misrepresents the situation to lay audiences, to make them think that the New Testament is incredibly corrupted and uncertain. And it's very interesting that when the bad Bart is pressed on this issue by someone, he'll come clean and admit this. For example, I heard Bart Ehrman interviewed on a radio show some time ago about misquoting Jesus, and the interviewer was talking to him about how uncertain the text of the New Testament, all the thousands and thousands of variants that there are, and how uncertain it is. And finally, the interviewer said to him, "Well, Dr. Ehrman, what do you think the text of the New Testament originally really said?" And Ehrman replied, "Well, I don't understand what you mean. What are you talking about?" And the interviewer said, "Well, the text of the New Testament, it's been so corrupted as it's been copied. What do you think the original text actually said?" And Ehrman said, "Well, it says pretty much what we have today, what it says now." And the interviewer was utterly confused. He said, "Well, I thought it was all corrupted." He says, "Well, we've been able to reestablish the text of the New Testament as textual scholars." So that he knows, and when pressed, admits that the text in the New Testament is 99% established. Now, let me just be very clear about this. That doesn't prove that the text is true. This doesn't prove that the text is historically accurate. It's just to say that we know what 99% of the original wording of these documents was. So, you see, that's not the same as saying that it's established with historical accuracy. Sometimes Christians make this mistake. It's just to say that we now know what 99% of the original words in the New Testament were, and that 1% that's still somewhat uncertain are just utter trivialities on which nothing hangs. So don't be troubled when you hear the bad Bart talking about the corruptions and the variants in the copies of the New Testament. The bottom line is that the text of the New Testament has now been established to about 99%. Now that leads to the second point that I wanted to talk about, and that is Bart Ehrman's work on the historical Jesus. Now I want to talk first of all about what are called the criteria of authenticity.